So back in 2011, I moved back from America, having worked at Harvard, to be here in the UK. And we started a little incubator, a growth accelerator. And at the time, there wasn't really much money for investment, so we did a lot of grant applications. And we started helping people secure money to deploy projects, usually in the technology space. And then something called Horizon 2020 came along, which was a whole lot of EU money, which of course disappeared because of Brexit, but hopefully it'll come back again. And what we found is that we could get 2-3 million euros to incubate an 18-month project. And the great bit about it is that the entrepreneurs didn't have to pay the money back, and they didn't actually have to do anything because it was a grant. So the projects were funded, it helped growth, and actually these companies became reasonably successful. Over the last 5 years, we've advised and worked with a lot of education technology businesses. While we were working out where did we want to focus our capabilities going forward. About 18 months ago, we decided to lay a bet in the vocational training space. So people go to university, we all know that route. And the challenge with university, when we did a whole lot of research on behalf of Manpower, is that 80% of the skills that you learn at university are not usable in the workplace. And all these students, me being one, came out of university with a large amount of debt. If you go to the vocational space, about 2 years ago, 2016-17, a new tax was put on all the big corporations. It was called the apprenticeship levy. And this tax created a pot of money, £2.8 billion a year, and it allows individuals to be able to access funding to learn vocational skills, professional skills, teaching builders, plumbers, electricians, healthcare workers, coders, lawyers, and all sorts of skills that actually have a profession. And what's really interesting is you can get 90% of the funding and you don't have to pay it back. There's no loan, you don't end up in debt. In fact, while you're learning your skill, the company you're working for is paying you to earn while you learn. So we've started buying little vocational training companies. In fact, the first that we bought was a test to see how flexible the Educational Skills Funding Agency was. And they told us they were really, really flexible. And of course, we did a turnaround and we worked with them, and lo and behold, they weren't that flexible. So what we realized is that we needed to have a multi-strand strategy. So we bought a company called Astara. Vicky's going to wave her hand just back there. And what she's been doing is she started doing the vocational training with prisoners to rehabilitate them. In fact, she's worked with 40 prisons in the UK to help prisoners who leave prison to find a job and learn new skills, which is hugely commendable. And she does other things by putting in place digital learning as well as analog learning to create blended learning solutions that are much more capable of delivery. Now, today, we haven't, as Milamber, raised any money ourselves for ages. In fact, we've been on the stock exchange, we've been on something called the Next Stock Exchange, and we came off in May. And over the last 4 years, we've raised about £100,000 of investment a year for the 4 years. But we now want to buy another company, and it's called Train for All. And John, who's the owner of the business, wants to work with us to sell it in stages and work with us to grow the business. And John, wave. And John has a construction training business. Now, who's had, I want hands up, a challenge with builders in this country? So John trains the best builders there possibly can be. In fact, a lot of the builders that he works with are from the armed forces. When they leave the armed forces, they want to retrain and reskill, and they go on projects that are funded partly by these new budgets, the apprenticeship levy, the adult education budget, the non-levy, and some money they might be given by the MOD when they leave to retrain. And as a result, they can now build houses and all sorts of things. So we're working with John to raise some money to basically buy that business. We're raising £300,000 as a minimum and £500,000 as a maximum. So if any of you are interested in that, please talk to me afterwards. Now, today is about collaboration. What you find is that if we all work together, and there's probably about 100 people in this room, and we all put in £3,000, we would have the money to be able to do the deal. But there's some other companies that we've been working with over the summer who have been working on their businesses to take them to the next level. Now, in April, we ran something called a Digathon. It's a made-up word, and it means a collaboration workshop. And using some of the software that Engage will talk to you about, we got these 20 companies to work together to accelerate business development activities. So what would usually take 6 months was condensed down to about a month. And it was amazing. We funded one company £750,000 in debt finance. We sold 2 of these Flux Innovation Lounges, which are going to be built in potentially Riyadh and Casablanca. And all sorts of other opportunities came out of it. But one of the things that we were working on is, how do you write a business plan? How do you write the elevator pitch that sells the value proposition about you and your company and what you want to do for the future? And that's where we started getting everyone to collaborate. So the companies today that are going to pitch to you are Pepper Learning. They're over here. Cloud Film, Damaris and Margaret. We've also got Select Invoice Finance. So why would an invoice finance company put an investor event? Because they're another way of funding the growth of a business. And they're actually our biggest shareholder is Milamber. And they've been really helpful, not just for us, but our portfolio companies in helping them grow. And Nick and James, thank you very much for the support over the years. We're also going to meet Engage. Dave Wilson's going to give you a bit of an overview on Engage and the Flux Innovation Lounge and what we classify as the product lab. This is software that's used by KPMG, PwC, EY, Deloitte, Accenture. But it's now available so that you can all use that technology at a fraction of the price that they do. Exactly. So I'm going to talk to you about one other thing. Investors have typically invested via EIS, Enterprise Investment Scheme, or SEIS. Now, there's been a lot of controversy over the last couple of years. Some companies have lost their EIS status, and that's caused investors some issues. The companies we work with who are SEIS or EIS qualified, we actually set up separate bank accounts. And we run the money through a separate bank account so that we can audit how those funds are spent, so that when HMRC in 5 years' time comes and does its audit to say, have you been a good person and have you actually invested it properly, we can go, yes, 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 yes. This is how the money was spent, and this is why we still maintain EIS status. You'll have heard about Ingenious Media doing all sorts of silly things for footballers and how they've ended up having to pay taxes. Oh, what a shame. But the point is that they did it wrong, and they got penalized for it. If you get penalized and you lose your EIS status, there is something called investor relief. And investor relief is actually a bit like entrepreneur's relief. And I'm not going to go into it now. There are some tax experts in the room, and talk to your accountants, they'll tell you about it. So Milamber is investor relief. Select Invoice Finance is investor relief. Engage is investor relief. Pepper and Cloud, they got their SEIS, EIS clearance yesterday, by the way. Just in time for today. And Pepper is SEIS and EIS. And you'll find that actually in the room, he might be here, but he's coming, there's a guy called Tawfiq Qureshi, who's now taken over an organization called Invitech. And Invitech is a fund manager that's starting to run SEIS, EIS funds for companies like ours, but also they're putting together a global technology fund. And it's really important that we have organizations that are investing at this level, because there are lots of organizations that do the next level of funding and the next level of funding, but it's this early stage capital that is critical for the growth of the economy, especially whatever's going to happen in the next couple of weeks with Brexit.